The Beardmore WB II. William Beardmore and Company Limited were among the firms that built BE-2Cs for the Admiralty. In 1916, Beardmores set up their own design office, with the late G. Tilghman Richards as their chief designer. Recognizing the deficiencies of the BE-2C as a military aircraft, Richards sought permission to build a development with a more powerful engine and cleaned-up fuselage. The resulting design was the Beardmore WB II, apparently undertaken as a private venture. As originally conceived, the WB II was designed for the 160-horsepower Beardmore six-cylinder inline engine, and embodied the BE-2 fin and rudder and most of the basic structure of the BE-2 mainplanes. The WB fuselage had good lines and was faired out to a roughly circular cross-section throughout its length. A large upright exhaust pipe led to a silencer mounted centrally above the upper wing. The most important difference between the WB-2 and the BE-2C lay in the fact that the Beardmore two-seater had its pilot in the front seat, armed with a fixed Vickers gun. The rear cockpit was fitted with a ring mounting for the observer's free Lewis gun. A Beardmore engine had been promised for the aircraft and should have been delivered by January 1917. A shortage of engines made this impossible, but by early May the Air Department of the Admiralty were able to release a 200-horsepower Hispano-Suiza engine to enable the aircraft to be flown. The design was therefore modified, and the WB-2 was built with a 200-horsepower Hispano-Suiza V8 engine, driving a 4-blade air screw that had a large open-fronted spinner. Twin upright exhaust stacks were fitted, and the two radiator blocks were installed in an inverted V, immediately behind the front cabane struts. The areas of the fin and rudder were increased, the latter being horn-balanced. The observer's gun ring was mounted directly on the upper longerons. The gun mounting, designed by Mr. Tilghman Richards, was a unique device. The gunner's seat was on a kind of witch's broomstick, one end of which pivoted on a ball joint on the cockpit floor, the other traveling round the ring, and having an extension to carry the gun and a locking device. Twin Vickers guns were provided for the pilot. The WB made its first flight on 30th of August, 1917, piloted by A. Duckenfield Jones. At some time during its early existence, the aircraft's 4-blade air screw was replaced by one with 2 blades. Early in 1917, the WB-2 was sent to Martlesham Heath. The dismantled airframe arrived there on the 3rd of October. Trials were held up because the air screw came off, and later a fuel tank burst. And on 19th November 1917, the aircraft was returned to Beardmore's. By the time of its return to Martlesham, on the 2nd of December 1917, its engine had been moved forward, the spinner removed, and the nose contours altered. Long exhaust stubs replaced the original stacks. The gun ring on the rear cockpit had been raised 5.5 inches. The shape of the underslung oil tank had been improved, and the original steel petrol tanks had been replaced by aluminum ones. Performance was quite good, and the official test report stated, "Maneuverability is very fair and the machine is easy to land." The WB-2 was not an improvement on types then in service, however, and it had an engine that was scarce and badly needed for SE-5As. Its trials at Martlesham Heath were completed by the 15th of December 1917, and it was then taken over by the Royal Naval Air Service. It was sent to the Isle of Grain on 17th December 1917, and was frequently flown there. The Beardmore two-seater did not go into production, nor was its development, the WB-2A, with a 230-horsepower BHP engine, built. 2 examples of a civil mail-carrying version were produced in 1920 with the designation Beardmore WB II-B. The Beardmore WB-III. Wartime deck flying was pioneered by the Bristol Scout C and furthered by Sopwith 991 pups of the Royal Naval Air Service. These aircraft were expected to serve as anti-airship fighters, operating from gun turret platforms on capital ships and other such carrier vessels as HMS Manxman, Furious, Argus, and Campania. Hangar space was at a premium on these ships and their contemporaries. The larger ship-borne seaplanes had folding wings, and it was obvious that it would be advantageous for the pups to have some means of folding also. The Beardmore Company, the first contractors to manufacture the pup under license, produced the WB.III, a variant of the pup that was extensively modified to that end. Mr. G. Tilghman Richards was responsible for the design work. To facilitate the folding of the main planes, the wing cellule was completely redesigned. Stagger was eliminated, and full-gap interplane struts connected the center fuselage to the lower stub wings. Steel tubes running athwart ships connected these struts to the upper longerons. On the prototype, and on the first production machines, interplane struts were fitted at the inboard ends of the spars of the outer wing panels. The fuselage was similar in construction to that of the pup, but was about a foot longer overall. The standard pup tail unit was used. The main planes were basically pup components modified at the roots for folding. On the prototype, the undercarriage could be folded into the bottom of the fuselage. This reduced its track drastically, and folding skids were fitted to the lower wingtips. The prototype, number 9950, was accepted at Eastchurch on 7th February 1917. 100 production WB.3s were ordered. The first 13 had the folding undercarriage of the prototype, and, like 9950, had struts at the inboard ends of the main planes, and the rod-operated, strut-connected ailerons of the prototype. The Lewis gun was mounted on a tripod in front of the cockpit, and fired upwards through a cutout in the center section. The first production WB.III flew for the first time on the 25th of June 1917. When only 3 more aircraft had been tested, production was held up for a month because a consignment of Larone engines had been aboard a ship sunk in the Channel. The folding undercarriage was not a success. The N6101 was soon tested with a jettisonable undercarriage consisting of 2 steel-tubed V-struts with their upper ends connected by span-wise lengths of steel tubing. If obliged to come down on the sea, the pilot could drop his wheels and minimize the risk of overturning on striking the water. Official test reports indicate that the undercarriage weighed 21 pounds, and that the WB.III's performance was not significantly better when flown without it. Production WB.IIIs had a jettisonable undercarriage. This form of the design was officially known as the SB-3D. The D suffix noted dropping undercarriage. The earlier version was designated SB-3F, the F signifying folding undercarriage. The aircraft was more commonly known as the Beardmore Folding Pup, however. On the SB-3D, the interplane struts at the inboard ends of the spars were discarded, and the aileron control system was modified. Cables replacing the rods and inter-aileron struts of the earlier version. The wingtip skids were removed, and the Lewis gun was mounted above the center section, where it fired forward over the air screw. There was no cutout in the center section. Flotation gear was fitted to the SB-3D. An inflatable airbag ran along the underside of the leading edge of each lower main plane. When deflated, it lay almost flush with the wing undersurface. An early test of this equipment was made by Lieutenant W.G. Moore, D.Sc., from the Isle of Grain. He dropped his undercarriage on the foreshore of Sheerness Harbor and then successfully ditched his SB-3D. Another form of jettisonable undercarriage was tested on the Isle of Grain in October 1917. This had faired V-struts and appears to have been designed and made at the Royal Naval Air Service Experimental Depot at Grain. The Beardmore WB.III was not particularly popular with pilots. The drastic modifications of the pup design impaired its handling qualities, and it inspired little confidence in aerobatics. It did not distinguish itself in any warlike way, although HMS Furious had as many as 14 SB-3Ds at one time. The carriers Nirana and Pegasus had SB-3Ds. One aircraft was used in an unsuccessful attempt to fly from the forecastle of the battlecruiser HMS Renown. On 31st October 1918, 18 SB-3Ds were with the Grand Fleet and 55 were in store. By this time, the Sopwith II F-1 was available in quantities and had a superior performance. Apparently, a few SB-3Ds went to the Japanese Navy, but the type disappeared from Royal Air Force service shortly after the armistice.